I'm in Bellevue now, which is near Seattle, and I'm here to work on heat signature out of Valve's offices and help them out with a little bit of something. I can't tell you anything about that side of things, but I can tell you about heat signature. And if that arrangement sounds strange to you, then you share this with US Immigration, who also found it strange when I got here about 3 weeks ago, which was before the recent immigration stuff. Obama was still president. And in fact, in the 3 hours I was waiting in their sort of holding area, I got to watch all of Obama's last speech. So I answered all the usual questions and tried to explain as best I can what I'm doing here and how it works. And they just responded in the normal way, which is, they just ask further questions and then they just say, okay. And then at the end of it, they handed me a comically large red card, like this big. And they didn't say anything. They didn't say like, no. They just handed me the giant red card and said, okay, can you go down there, please? And I didn't say, but I thought, like I've heard of a green card. This one I noticed isn't green. And it doesn't look like a kind of yes, you're in card. It looks like maybe there's further steps to this. And there were further steps, and like I say, it took 3 hours, and it involves basically just answering the same questions to multiple different people, trying to show any like evidence that that I have this offer to work out of Valve's offices and how it will work. Each time someone asks you those questions, then you have to wait for another like hour or so, and then eventually their superior comes along and asks you questions, and then you have to wait for another hour or so, and their superior asks you questions. And the top level of this guy, they were all very like friendly. Well, actually, they got friendly as you went higher up. Actually, the first few people I talked to were completely sort of just emotionless, and then the further, I guess, maybe just the longer I've been waiting, the nicer they were to me, and the more like, oh, sorry about this. They were, and then the top level guy was very nice, and part of the in my attempts to show them proof that I've been invited here, I ended up showing them a bunch of discussions, a bunch of emails that I'd written to my friend about like what we're up to in Dishonored 2, because it was part of the same email thread in which I was invited here. And so then we started talking about Dishonored 2 playstyles, and I said that I was more of a stealth player, and then he asked me about like what other games I'd made, and I said Gunpoint, and he said, oh! And he just ran off down the corridor. And then he came back with his phone to show me that he has the Gunpoint soundtrack on his phone, and that Gunpoint's one of the only like 3 games that he bought last year, and he uses the soundtrack sometimes in employee reviews to put people at ease, because it has this slightly kind of like, the mission music is kind of like, I don't know, he says it gives it a more light-hearted atmosphere. And I thought like that, okay, great, I'm in, this is, it's over, surely. But no, it was another hour after that. Anyway, what I'm doing here is completely within the guidelines of what the visa waiver program between the UK and the US covers, but it's like, it uses all of the allowances that it makes for this, and their point to me was, you're not supposed to do that really, it's like, that's the absolute maximum, and the closer you get to that maximum, I think the more suspicious they are of you, and the more they're going to have to ask you questions and stuff. Anyway, that worked out. So I've also hired a programmer, John Winder, to work with me, and so he and I are working at Valve's office and on heat signature, and that is really good. I've never done that before. I've literally never worked with a programmer. Even when I've worked, I've very rarely worked with other people in person at all, and when I have, I've always been the only programmer. Yeah, obviously, all the obvious benefits I knew this would have come into effect, which is that it's great. John is way more technical than me, so he can handle the stuff that I am worst at, which is the whole point. But also, just having 2 people working on the same thing is really good, and having 2 brains on any given problem as well is also really good. So like anything I'm doing, I'm actually kind of still adjusting to this, but I'm trying to lower my tolerance for this, but like any problem I have that's difficult, I will run by him and make sure I'm thinking about it the right way, and then often by the time I finish explaining it, I've figured out what I should do, but if not, there'll be a bit of back and forth and stuff. and anything he's working on where he doesn't know how the code works, I can help him with that. And yeah, it's just really good to have like, it's also just a much kind of more fun atmosphere to have like someone that you're running problems by and someone you're talking to about everything you're working on. When there are things that are difficult or a mess or stupid, it's a joke rather than kind of a personal crisis, which is what it sometimes feels like when you're working on your own. Like you look at your code and think, oh god, this is a disaster. If someone else is there, that's funny. If you're on your own, it's much less funny. So in terms of actually like what we're working on, loads of really long-standing stuff has been fixed now. Loads of like big, like out-of-memory crashes on my laptop was a horrible, scary thing that I didn't know how to approach really, and we fixed that completely now. The ships we make can be massively bigger than they used to be. It used to be able to go up to like, if you went to 10 by 10 it would usually crash at some point, and now you can go to 15 by 15 modules, sorry, which is, it's hard to really like explain in words how big that is, but it's big enough that you look at it and think, holy shit. So I actually don't want ships to be that big most of the time, but it will be really good for your personal mission, which is kind of like the final one you do that you've been building up towards. If that one is really huge, that'd be cool. I'm starting to think, right now it's kind of like your personal mission is always the biggest, it's always the toughest, it's always got everything kind of maxed out. It is a little bit random what kind of hazards you face, but it's pretty much just all the bad stuff. And there's a time limit. Now I'm thinking maybe there should be two types, because the really big ships, that's only their size, their daunting, intimidating size is only really a good thing if, like I want it to be intimidating, but I don't want it to be like, oh fucking hell. I don't want it to be nasty. And I think with the time limit, the size becomes like too stressful. It's like, oh god, I don't even want to engage with this, I just got to bolt through it because of this time limit. So maybe it should be a case of like, most personal missions are big ships that aren't going somewhere, and then every now and then you get a slightly smaller ship that is going somewhere. So, you know, for this person, their personal goal, their challenge is not going to be working their way methodically through a huge ship, it's going to be working their way through a slightly smaller ship but to a deadline, and that's an unusual type of personal mission, or maybe like, you know, half and half. I think that'd be cool. But the personal mission stuff in general, it's in there, it's presented to the player now in a way that you can see how close you are to having enough money to trigger it, and that's good. Liberations are not yet presented to the player, and I will do that probably before GDC, but both those things are structure things, and the longer I work on Heat Signature, the less I think, the more I err on the side of getting the interior game more rich and more fun and interesting first. So personal goals are very rudimentary right now, you just have to amass enough money to trigger them. This thing of like getting together the right equipment to solve the challenges that were aboard the ship, that was what I was trying at Stugan, and it didn't really pan out because the whole point of the whole virtue of the game when it works is that problems can have multiple solutions, and even when you're under-equipped for a problem you might be able to find a clever way around it. And so if I tell you, oh, you need X, Y, and Z to conquer challenges A, B, and C, you might quite rightly say, no, I don't. And then I'm fucked. Like, then the whole structure of the game falls apart. So if you're going to pin the whole structure of the game on something like that, it's going to fall apart. So right now it's just money. You just need enough money to sort of buy the intel and set up your personal goal. And that's pretty crude, but I'm not going to try and make it good yet. I'm going to try it first. I'm going to get some people at Valve to play it. It's pretty much ready for that now. And then I've got to add a whole load of new items and probably some kind of new hazard type. I'm not sure what they'll be yet. And I want to tweak the interior level generation a bit. Right now it's based on clusters of guards that go off on errands, which is a really good system, and it supports a lot of the kind of like puzzle solving mixed with combat, mixed with stealth and stuff. All those things are involved in that, but it's really kind of just one type of obstacle, and I would like to have multiple types, and I have an idea for one more. I would like to have ideas for at least 2 more, and then we can work in some more variety in the ship, and there'll be more kind of decision making about like, okay, I've got a level 2 security keycard, and there's 2 level 2 zones that I can get to, which one do I want to tackle? That kind of stuff would be cool. Right now that already is the case, but those two level 2 zones will be pretty similar. They'll have a similar number of guards and a similar kind of arrangement, and I'd like to change that. And then the other thing is feel. I want, just combat to feel a lot better. I just haven't put a lot of work into that in general. It's got a nice sound effect for whacking someone with a wrench. That's all I've really done. So lots of work to do there. And I wonder, I should look up what we have done. I'm trying to remember what we've done, because it's generally a whole load of smaller jobs. And the biggest thing I've done recently is that the whole feel of flying around is way nicer now. And before I came here, it was a system where I struggled a lot with autopilot and letting you set a course to somewhere, and then your speed limit would turn off and you go as fast as you could get while accelerating constantly, and all this other stuff. And the controls for it were never smooth, and it was never intuitive, and it was always a little bit of a faff to do. And so then I switched to a system where, okay, you just manually thrust and you steer in the same mode that you normally fly around in, except that if you've been going at max speed for a while, we accelerate time. And that sounds good, but then when you brake, it becomes really awkward because the braking feels really sudden. And anyway, I've moved to a system now where you basically just have a really powerful thruster. While you're accelerating, it just kind of keeps kicking up. It keeps getting faster and faster, and more powerful. And then when you slow down, the reason I've never done that before is that if you spend 30 seconds accelerating, if I then make it so it takes you 30 seconds to decelerate, you're just going to be out in the black. No one's going to compensate for that. 1% of players will actually enjoy the challenge of oh, I need to plan ahead to when I'm going to stop and get that right. So instead, braking is just artificially good. It doesn't feel this way. It still feels like it takes a long time to brake. It feels like it's difficult to stop once you've got a lot of speed, but it's not as difficult as it should be. It's 10 times more powerful than it should be, and it just kind of feels nice. Just one of those things where it actually didn't take long to arrive at that. It was just first few tweaks, and suddenly just felt so much nicer to fly around, and the flow of it feels really good now. I'm looking at Source Tree, which is what we're using for version control with GitHub, and it's good, but it color codes things in a way that is baffling. It's my branch, the Tom branch, has changed from pink to blue to grey, and now I don't know what the hell anything is. So found loot items can now have any traits. Oh yeah, incidental ships, as you're flying around, now other ships, you'll just come across them. And, oh shit, yeah, I hope we redid the whole loot system. Previously loot would just be, there'd either be a box that had a gun in it, or there'd be a grenade lying around, or a Frazer or a subverter lying around. And now any good loot is in a box, and when you open the box, that's when it's revealed what the loot is. So there's a nice little moment of ooh, what did I get? And then all of the way that what you get is calculated is totally redone. Previously it was just kind of whatever the ship generation happened to do, and it would often end up just giving you 6 loot rooms all in a row. Now a ship has a loot rarity level, so there's such a thing as a rare ship, or the levels I'm going for are standard, interesting, rare, and unique. And if you're aboard a rare ship, then one of those crates will have a rare item in it, the others will have lesser stuff. And so the level of the ship is the max rarity level of the contents. And then I did a whole load of work so that when it generates an item, I just need to tell it, here's how rare I want it to be, and then it'll generate one of those. And so for guns, a rare gun will have multiple really good traits. It'll be silenced and rapid fire, and maybe have some other thing. For grenades, I don't know if we have rare grenades in there yet. I think grenades are all interesting. That's a rule of the Heatsinger's universe. All grenades are interesting. And then for teleporters, things like swappers and visitors, which are the ones that don't care about locked doors or walls or anything. Those ones will be rare. And something like a Sidewinder teleporter, which is the one where it can kind of path through space, instantaneously. So it's effectively like moving very, very quickly. That is an interesting killer one. It's not rare. So basically the whole loop balancing is way better, and you kind of know what you're going to get. I'm not totally sure how I communicate that to the player. Right now the ship icons themselves are coloured to the loop rarity level, which doesn't really work, it looks kind of ugly. But I want that thing of like, you're flying to your objective and you see, you know, a standard ship go past and you don't stop. And if you see a rare ship go past, you probably will stop and you go over and investigate. And if you saw a unique ship go past, you'd definitely stop, because unique stuff is going to be, every one of them is going to be handcrafted and, you know, given a specific name, and will probably have, it will definitely have a unique property. So, you know, a gun where the bullets ricochet 27 times or something like that, like something that just can't generate, that you can't get from the random generation. And we've got loads of ideas for that. So that, putting in all those traits and stuff, like fleshing out the loot system is going to be, sorry, the loot system is done, but fleshing out the loot that is in that system, the loot content, I guess, that's going to be really fun. Whenever I've dabbled in that, it's gone really quickly, and it's added loads to the game. And I guess those are my next two jobs. Like, we'll see what the testing produces. Next week is when I'm going to start doing some tests, and we'll see what it needs there. But even if the biggest problem with the test is the personal goal system, everyone hates it and they want something better, I probably still won't work on improving it yet. I'll probably just let that sit in the back of my head and then figure out, work on the short-term stuff, make more loot, make more cool puzzles, and just make the interior game a better game, and let the personal mission stuff percolate in the back of my head, because at the end of the day I don't think it matters if I fuck that up or if I just do a lackluster job. I think that's a part of the game that can afford to be only okay, and the interior game cannot, it must be brilliant. And that's kind of like the revelation I've come to over this far into Heat Signature, like way, way, way too late. I've discovered that this whole idea of going inside spaceships is not the core of a game. It doesn't by itself sort of form a good basis for a game. Like, that's not what you're gonna, the actual moment you dock, it's cool, but that's not the core of what you do, right? It has to be what happens after you dock, or something else. It could have been the space game or whatever, but the way it's ended up has been in the interior games, where all my interesting ideas ended up being. And so what I've really made is just a really fancy framing device for a top-down stealth game with sort of emergent elements and hopefully a very wide tool set and interesting challenges. And that's cool. Like, it's good news because I can make that game, but I haven't made that game yet. I mean, I kind of have now, like since Stugan, around Stugan to now, I've been working on that game. But for the other 2.5 years, I wasn't working on that game. I was working on the framing device for that game. So it's a useful piece of information to have, and that's what I'm going to get on with now.